This tower is destroying itself from the inside out.
We haven't talked since season one, I think. So
Gosh.
there's a lot to catch up on, but I feel like I have to lead off by saying Egwene's season two arc was some of my, it feels wrong to say one of my favorite storylines last season, but honestly, you give such a tremendous performance. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to lead with that.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you so much.
but it does tie into something that I wanted to ask about, which is Egwene's time with the Seanchan and how that experience impacts her heading into season three. Um, we are going to talk a little bit of spoilers, but as we see in these initial episodes, she is kind of being haunted by that particular point in her life before we realize, obviously, that these dreams are sort of being manipulated by an outside force. But I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, how that experience is still really following her and haunting her when we pick up with her at the beginning of the third season.
Yeah. I mean, that experience of shooting those episodes and scenes sometimes still haunts me a bit. Even recreating, those scenes in season three when they're like, back in the cage, collar back on. I was like, oh God. But it's sort of funny. I think I spent so much time in that world and in that part of her life. And it was such an important moment for me to get right. I feel that I sort of feel I feel quite comfortable in playing that now. I think because when she is the Damane and she's in the kennels, she's completely stripped back of her powers. There's nothing pulling her up and out of this plight other than herself and her own willpower and her own inner strength. So then I think, like, physically, I had a lot of freedom to move as much or as little as I wanted. But you're absolutely right. At the start of season three, we find her still being haunted by what she's endured. And I think this season is really a season of her self recovery and her healing. And there are some people that she meets along the way that really help her with this. And in going inward and dealing with her past and what she's experienced, she's able to truly set herself free from it and grow. And I think something that I love about Egwene, no matter what she goes through in her life, whether it's a hardship or a positive experience, it still has, I think, like, a really positive influence in her and the way she moves forward in life. So she's just like a little sponge. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge stepping back into that after so much time had passed.
Yeah, I do want to touch on some of the characters that Egwene meets later in the season, but before we get to that, I feel like this show has always been circling around the concept of the Dragon Reborn prophecy, but this season really feels like it leans into fate as a theme, futures that may or may not happen. We kind of see
Mm.
that with the visions that Moraine has, but also specifically Egwene's time through the arches when she goes through her accepted test. Um, from a performance standpoint, though, what is it like to kind of get to play out some of those futures, even if it's only for the span of just one scene?
Oh, it's incredible and so exciting because, you know, in this show you could live 1,000 different lifetimes. Because, that's it's everything and anything is possible, and we see that. That's awfully difficult for, I know our writers and sometimes our crew to sort of, and for us as well, but to, like, articulate that and put that on screen. I'm like, it's mind bending on how you try and understand the way time is dealt with in the Wheel of Time. But it is really exciting. There's definitely a couple of potential futures or parallel universes that we get to play in. And that's always so much fun because you fully go with the hair and costume and the sets. So that's always really exciting.
Yeah. This first episode kind of picks up where we left off with everybody at the end of season two, everyone kind of coming together in Falm, and we have the reunion of everyone together, and there is a nice feeling seeing everyone back, but it feels like this gang too is also really weighed down by everything that they've been
Mm,
through to the point where things just don't really feel the same anymore when you're watching it as a viewer. And I'm wondering for Egwene, like what forces her to kind of have that realization for herself in terms of this group of friends that she's known, arguably her entire life.
Yeah. I think they definitely sort of slip back into that comfortability and familiarity, and that is something that they're all wanting and yearning for. Certainly at the end of season 2 and at the start of season 3. Um, like you said, they're being weighed down by their past and what they've endured, and how can you even begin to articulate what you've gone through, particularly, Egwene. It's just too painful. But I think for one brief moment, it's really wonderful for the characters to to have that feeling of home and familiarity. But ultimately, things have forever changed, and it never will be the same.
Yeah. I mean, talking about how difficult it is for her to articulate her feelings, I was struck by watching these early scenes with Rand and Egwene because I feel like it's sort of it's that tension that we're seeing through the entire group, but
Mm,
focused between the two of them in
yeah.
your early scenes with Yosha. And she Egwene is, it feels like she's struggling with intimacy, after what she's been through. It's difficult for her to be touched. And I think you see that it's difficult for her to even explain fully why that is to Rand. But I'm wondering if like you and Yosha had conversations about this turning point in their relationship and kind of playing the distance in those scenes, because even when they're
Yeah.
physically close to each other, it feels like emotionally they're just not really on the same page.
Absolutely, and thank you for addressing that. That is something that I sat down with Rafe and Justine and Kiran, and told them I said I'd love to just flesh that out a bit more. Like you said, even though you're intimate and you're close with someone, you've never felt more alone and isolated. And I still don't think that Egwene feels like her body is her own, because it hasn't been for so long. She's had her autonomy brutally ripped away from her. And so I think that's why it's so important, her finding that comfort and familiarity in Rand. And this is, again, yeah, like you said, something that Yasha and I really spoke about for a long time, because obviously he's been intimate with someone else. And he's got this, like, big gnarly scar on his stomach from his battle with, like, Ishmael. And so those are, her neck, and I guess his wound, his infested open wound, are two parts of their body that they have a lot of red tape around, but yet they both let each other in. Like, no, you can touch me there, you can touch me here. And it's sort of like giving yourself to someone again, trying to at least. So that was really important for us to play into.
Yeah. Season 3, obviously we see at the beginning of the season, everybody kind of splits and goes separate directions, but there's a few of you going to the Waste this season,
Mhm.
which I think a lot of fans are going to be excited to see.
Yeah.
I wanted to know though how the change in setting really helped inform your performance, because a lot of that experience, if fans from the books, from the books too, it really does push Egwene out of her comfort zone in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I know for me personally, and I I can say for pretty much everyone else, um, I think we were all pushed out of our comfort zones to shoot on location. I mean, shooting in South Africa and in Cape Town was one of, like, the biggest joys of my life, and highlights of my career. Um, it really does inform so much of what we do. You just can't replicate being in a desert in South Africa with cast, crew, and like 500 supporting artists standing on sand dunes. You just can't, I feel you just can't replicate that in a studio. It certainly really helps you energetically interacting with tangible objects and being in that location. And it's so important in this series because the landscape is like a character in itself. And so by honoring that, by actually shooting on these locations, is really special. And it also really bonds you and binds you with the cast, especially new casts that are already coming into a very established show. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to be in a foreign location and really connect and bond together. So we're super lucky that we get to do that.
Yeah. Talking about new cast and bonds, Egwene also gets the chance to interact with a lot of the new characters this season, especially the Aiel Wise ones. And I wanted to ask about what she learns from them that kind of helps her shape or maybe reforge her perception of herself. Because this season, it really feels like she doesn't really feel like she's part of the White Tower
Yeah.
necessarily. She feels a bit like an outsider there. So, how does working with these women really kind of help forge that new perception of herself?
I think it really sort of breaks her mind into understanding the magic in the world like the magic that exists in the world. And she's being told by these wise ones, you're special, you can do this, like you've got to lean into it, we're here to support you. And I think she's always gravitated towards women in her life to learn from, to look up to, for support. And it was just so incredible working with Nukaka and Salome this season, because they just brought something so unique to the show, which I don't think we've seen before, and which feels very rooted in Aiel culture. Um, I think through Egwene's storyline and the introduction of the Wise Ones, again, we just see the way the magic and the world and the lore in this story is consistently and continually expanding. Um, it was something I was really, really excited to dive into.
Yeah. I am all out of time. I feel like that's a great note to end on, though. I mean, I can't wait for everyone else to get to dive into this season two. So far, it's been amazing what I've seen, and I'm really excited to get to kind of see more. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for being
Thank
with me.
you. Likewise. It was great chatting.